John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Charles Pelegrino. The book is To Hell and Back. We're discussing the Nagasaki bomb, August 9th, 1945, about 11:02 in the morning. And the survivors. There are double survivors. We've touched on some of them already. We'll come to more. People who survived the Hiroshima bomb traveled to Nagasaki, many of them whom, because they were employed by Mitsubishi, which at this time had a steel and armament factory in Nagasaki, to report to a supervisor. And we're going to go to that plant because it was the source of some people living through this. The plant was not far away from the hypocenter, and one survivor is named Hagasaki, Inoiki Hagasaki. He survives because of, well, actually, Charlie, everybody survives. It's the phenomenon of the shock cocoon, of the shielding, the blast shielding, yes. And also because you're surrounded by walls that don't fall on you. And in this case, he was inside a factory that didn't fall on him.
Right.
And because the factory doesn't fall on him, he has this sensation of being the only one there. He's surrounded by, immediately, the smoke, which you emphasize, they called it the stench of smoke. He was one of the few people you report, it might be the only person, who had a memory of what the bomb sounded like. What did he say?
Right. It sounded like over 100 large blasts of thunder going off near his ears all at once. He was sent to pick up one piece of equipment and happened to be near a refrigerator unit, very large unit that wasn't being used. He was under part of a huge engine for a submarine, and the pressure that came in through the roof was such that when the door of the refrigerator unit broke, it was as if that was a vacuum and he was sucked right into the refrigerator against padded walls. And although his clothes and his shoes were torn from him, he was protected both by the shielding of the equipment that was above him and then by being drawn into that refrigerator unit. Everyone else, every employee, his boss, they were all gone. This huge engine for a submarine, the wall of the factory was gone, and the engine was about 30 feet away outside.
And Hayasaki then emerges from the plants, and now the horrors. We have to do this, Charlie, all right? There are some details here that a lot of people see from the children's point of view and the adult's point of view. The alligator people, for example, the death sand, and the collective scream that Hayasaki hears as he's moving up the ridge towards the dormitories where he knew there were thousands of children living. First, the alligator people. What is that describing?
That was what children like Michi Hattori saw, that these were people who were exposed to the flash on one side, and one side of their body took on the appearance of almost like the alligator skin appearance of burned wood.
And the ant-walking people, they were also burned, but they had been so deracinated that they didn't know where they were. They weren't even really much responding to their environment anymore. Those are different than alligator people, correct?
Right. Well, some they were almost the same.
Okay.
Many of the alligator people, as some children describe them,
were ant
they
walkers.
walked for a while and
see.
They died
Right.
and fell. These were severely burned people. And as Nancy Cantwell and Dr. Fuji had seen, to their satisfaction, that those who were still walking 2 days later had no awareness of self at all and were not suffering.
As Hagasaki moves up away from the Mitsubishi plant, he hears a collective yelling going on. That's the thousands trapped in the woodpile. And that stays with him the rest of his life.
Right. That was the sound of one voice of the people who were trapped under the collapsed buildings that started to burn. And as he continued walking north away from the hypocenter, he gradually heard that sound going out.
He also came across very badly burned, maybe alligator people, maybe ant walkers who were collapsed. And they were all begging him for water. Water, give me water. He responds, he takes rags, charcoal rags, and he goes and dips them in water. I guess the river's nearby. And then he brings them back and squeezes the water into their mouths. One by one, they die. Why?
Right. He didn't know at the time, and it wasn't until more recent times that physicians could put it together that a lot of people who are terminally ill, they'll wait until a sister returns or until a daughter's child is born. There's something that keeps them alive that they were wishing for. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, these people who wished for just that drink of water, they often died right the moment they got the water. And this survivor that we're talking about, he said, as he squeezed the water into their mouths, it was as if they had never tasted anything more delicious. When he got 25 people down the line, he saw that they had all died within minutes.
And he thought
he blamed
murdered
himself.
He
carried that with him
till 2010. 2010?
Actually, until just last year. When I was,
he died in 2014.
No, he's still alive, in fact.
See. He's still
with him. He thought of himself as a murderer for 69 years.
Governor Nagano and Prefect Nishioka. Nishioka knew what happened at Hiroshima, and he asked to put out pamphlets to tell people that this could happen again. Nagano blocked it, or was it Tokyo that blocked it?
Well, Nagano was following rules from Tokyo, where at first it was said only about 500 people were lost in Hiroshima. He did block it, and the prefect was not allowed to publish pamphlets and get them out to people, even though there were printing presses right there.
Did Nagano believe him?
He was skeptical about it.
Nagano is the prefect and the governor, and when he's told 50,000 dead, he goes into a trance. You describe him as wandering around in the office. But Nishioka is not there at governance. This is in Nagasaki, which has not been blasted. Urakama upriver has been blasted. Nishioka is out with his driver, and they know it's happened the second time. Nishioka sees the ant-walking people. He sees alligator people. He sees people eyeless and faceless. And he sees one person walking on the stumps of his legs. So people continue to move, though they're dying while they're moving.
Right.
They're so stunned. He uses the term atomic fallout. How did he know that?
He had been working with some of the scientists. He knew some of the scientists in Tokyo who were involved in the Japanese nuclear program. And he had an idea of what was happening to people who had come on the train from Hiroshima. And he also had a very good idea that irradiated material was falling out of these clouds. He had passed through what looked to him in Hiroshima like burning candles on the ground, these unusual lights. And his legs were during the train, he noticed that he was bleeding under the skin in his legs, and he figured out that this was a radiation effect. And he had a sense that he was going to die from all of this.
There are many more horrors. We go now to the hospital. This is the Urakami Medical College Hospital and St. Francis Hospital on the side of the ridge. The hospital has survivors, many survivors in it, some of whom are tuberculosis who are going to be miraculously restored, perhaps in contrast to the radiation and the burns. There are heroes here. Dr. Nagai and Dr. Akazuki. They were 1.4 kilometers from the hypocenter. They heard the B-29 diving, and yet they survived. The phenomenon I would like you to describe, Charlie, goes on all the rest of the day into the night. They call it a cyclone of fire and smoke. What is that?
The Nagasaki bomb, in Hiroshima, you had a firestorm and you had these tornadoes of fire. In Nagasaki, when Akazuki looked down and he saw the smoke rising, he said it was like this glowing sea, and then he realized he was looking at a sea of fire. And, of course, it developed a cyclonic rotation.
And it was down in the valley? It was sitting there?
Down in the valley, and then it rose up into the sky many times higher than the pyramids.
And it lasted for hours?
Yes, and it was a cyclone of fire. So it was drawing in oxygen from along the valley, along the river valley, up into itself. And at first people saw two of these things, but one of them sort of suffocated and collapsed into smoke, and the other kept burning for quite a while.
More survivor memories from the Nagasaki bomb. This is Charles Pelegrino's To Hell and Back, the last train from Hiroshima. We're not going to get back from hell. We're going to stay there. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.